But more importantly, if you decided that you are going to go into gardening only after you put in all the effort to learn plant physiology, soil and nutrient health, plant propagation, entomology, composting, weed management, pest management, and landscape design all at once, you'll never start, ever. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to my garden. My name is Vanessa, and I turn our yard into our own little happy place at home. And I want to give you whatever tools I have to help you do the same. Today, I want to convince you that your imperfect and maybe even messy garden is the garden that's going to turn you into an excellent gardener. If only you have the eyes to see it and the patience to endure it. My thinking is that we don't give the learning process enough credit. I don't mean the researching on YouTube and Pinterest sort of learning. That part is easy, right? You can spend hours watching videos and still, in fact, learn nothing at all. And it's not your fault, really, because your brain can only retain so much information out of necessity. But what I mean is the learning that comes from doing. I know that in my life, I retain the most of what I actually do. That's the secret to learning anything, actually. You have to do the thing. Do it badly, but do it because doing it badly is exactly how you get better. There's no way around this. And the good news for you, my friend, is that if your garden is, in your opinion, messy or ugly or not well designed, you're already in the top percentage of people who will succeed at having a fantastic garden because you already have a garden. You already have a place to practice whatever knowledge you're ingesting. There's a progression to learning to do anything, and gardening is no different. When you simply start with whatever little knowledge you do have, you will inevitably run into the next set of problems. And it will likely be a problem that you didn't even know existed at the start. And that's good, otherwise you'd be discouraged. And in the likelihood that you did know it existed, I bet you would have had no context for how to make sense of it. Now, encountering it in context, you can make better sense of it. And from there, the cycle would continue. Once you fix the second problem, you'll have even more context to encounter the third problem, and the fourth problem, and the seventh problem, and the 12th problem. Until one day, your messy little garden is a pillar of beauty in your mind. Okay, so far I've been speaking generically, but practically, here's how this worked out in my own garden journey. First, I decided I wanted to grow pretty plants, and so I started out like everybody else by planting around the foundation of my house. After that, I ran into my very first problem. I realized that some of the plants weren't thriving. Now, having solved perhaps, I don't know, my 39th problem, I know that there's a whole host of reasons why plants would not be thriving that's so generic. But at the time, having had no such knowledge, I simply put one foot in front of the other and learned whatever I could about those specific plants. It turned out in that specific instance, I was having a problem with sunlight. I had planted sun-loving plants in a spot that was supposed to be full sun. While I wasn't completely ignorant of light requirements and how generally the sun moved around my house and, thereby creating and cementing certain spots as sunny and shady, what I didn't understand was how that light amount might change depending on what other structures were blocking it on my property or on my neighbor's property. For example, I assumed that the south side of my house received full sun all the time because south sides of houses get full sun according to the books. And listen, the books aren't wrong. More sun exposure is a direct result of being to the south side of anything. That is, of course, unless something to the further south of you shades you out. This was the case with the south side of my house. The light was blocked by a giant oak tree to the east here and a cedar tree to the west there, therefore rendering it a mostly shaded garden. I'll show you this here. This is the south side of my house here. And if my house was the only structure here, it would get blasted by sun all day on this side. But because my neighbor has the oak tree and we have the cedar over there, and there are many small trees in between the two, the south side of the house is in essence the north side of those trees. And so what I ended up with is a garden bed that has very interesting lighting. Some parts of it is full shade, some parts of it is full sun, and the rest is just somewhere in between. So you see, it wasn't that I didn't know that different plants had different light requirements. I knew this in the abstract, but now I needed to keep things alive in my garden. And so I had to take this abstract knowledge and make it concrete very quickly on my own property. In that spot in particular, I remember planting blueberries in a spot that now I have hostas because I didn't know any better. I thought just because it was the south side of the house, I could plant blueberries, but the blueberries hated it. And I quickly had to learn that I had to move those blueberries. In fact, they died in that spot. And later on, I turned it into a beautiful little shaded garden. I always think of that story every time I'm working on that garden bed because it's humbling. Those were my beginnings. In those early days, I didn't even know what I didn't know. But the knowledge became clearer because I did the thing I was learning. It wasn't pretty, but it was preparation for pretty. The learning didn't stop there, of course. Having understood my own property's light composition better, I began to move plants around, so they could be in their more suitable spot. But of course, that only revealed the next problem. You can't just move plants around freely without taking some care. I moved things in the middle of July, for example, without giving them excessive water. I didn't know any better. And soon they began to wilt or even die. At first, being new, I naturally assumed that I was still having the light requirement problem. But no, I had a whole new problem that I needed to solve. The problem this time was stress on plants from being moved. Because you see, plants experience what is called plant transplant shock. Being moved from one location to the other means that they now need to quickly adjust to the demands of the new home. You, as their caretaker, can significantly reduce the amount of stress on them if you simply water them properly, give them excess water. And so I saved as many as I could by catering to the ones that needed water and ignoring the rest. But soon, having to water so many plants, I realized that maybe I needed a thicker layer of mulch to help with water retention. And so while solving one problem, another one rose to the forefront of my garden's needs. Once I took care of the mulch problem for both water retention and weed control, one or two of the plants developed like a white film on their leaves. So I went down that rabbit hole of, plant disease and learned that that was powdery mildew because we live in zone 7 and it's very humid. And especially in spots where I don't have good airflow, this mildew develops. So I moved those plants. Another problem revealed and another problem solved and another lesson learned. And then some other leaves started to experience a different sort of discoloration. And so I learned that some leaf discoloration problems could be caused by soil health, which then meant that I needed to do a soil analysis. What nutrients were lacking in my soil? And how do I fix it? I soon learned that soil nutrient deficiencies could be fixed if you just add a whole bunch of good compost to your yard. And so I thought, well, I should learn how to compost. And in another line, I was learning about garden design and space curation. And in another line, I was learning about irrigation and rainfall. And in another line, I was learning about pest management, beneficial bugs, and creating a well-balanced ecosystem. You get the point, right? One solution revealed the next set of problems. And that's okay. I could handle it one at a time. I spent the first 3 years of my gardening just like this, running into one problem after the other and solving them one by one. I loved it. Learning to cultivate my piece of land was a gold mine to me. And while I was seeing failures, the failures gave me something over which to soar. And in life and in gardening, is there a sweeter feeling? The problem solving is still my favorite part of gardening. Maybe it scratches an intellectual itch or something. And while the beauty of the garden is indeed the end goal, for me, the knowledge that I gain learning to garden is what motivates me. Those little constantly messy gardening days were the golden days of my garden education, and it still is. While I struggled to ingest it all, I learned so much in those early days of gardening. And that knowledge gave me the confidence to expand on. The learning in the garden can be as slow as you want it, but it was also as quick as I needed it to be. That's the beauty of hands-on learning of any kind. You can go at your pace. Soon after I felt confident from my experimenting with the foundation garden beds, I did expand the garden outward to the whole yard. I had enough knowledge that I gained from working around the foundation to know that I could handle making the whole yard into a cottage garden of my dreams. Listen, I'm not saying that I knew it all or that I know it all. This is gardening. There's so much to learn. I'm saying that I had, in fact, learned enough about light requirements, soil health, composting, weed and moisture management to know that I could expand. But what I also learned was that the garden was my greatest teacher, revealing problems, sometimes slowly, but often urgently. Because my best learning came from working in the garden, I knew that with that mindset, I could move forward. My friends, the more you garden with your hands and not just with your eyes, especially looking at other people's gardens, the better you become at being a gardener. One more note on beautiful gardens. I feel like I should mention this. It's so important to get inspiration for beauty from others, of course. But if seeing pretty images on Pinterest makes you feel like you need to get your garden to be that pretty right away, you are going down the wrong path. One, because listen, internet images are curated. You know this, right? We all, to some extent, do our best to present our best work on the internet. We all struggle with weeds just like you do, and I know you do because I do. But more importantly, if you decided that you are going to go into gardening only after you put in all the effort to learn plant physiology, soil and nutrient health, plant propagation, entomology, composting, weed management, pest management, and landscape design all at once, you'll never start, ever. Instead, let your little mess of a garden be your teacher. And with each passing season, you'll be closer and closer to being a great gardener. You can't bypass the learning, but you can create a blueprint for yourself, especially if fire hydrant style learning is not for you. Create a blueprint by designing and planning for as much as you can ahead of time. If you are indeed at this stage where you want some guidance on garden design, I'd like to invite you to watch this video. It's my short masterclass on garden design. I think that it will help you. See you there.